Please be seated. We're back on the record of case number 12 CF 1083A, State versus George Zimmerman. I believe the jurors are back there. They're on their way up.
Your Honor, B72, present.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. You are hereafter known only as B72, Juror B72. And the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you some questions about the questionnaire that you filled out on Monday morning. Mr. De La Ronda, you may start.
May it please the court?
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Bernie.
I'm sorry, Susan. Well, let me tell her that we've opened up court and we have called in Juror B72. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, sir. I'm going to be asking you questions limited to in terms of the publicity and also whatever else you respond on the questionnaire. Okay? If I've got it right from the questionnaire, you don't really pay much attention or care for the news. Is that correct?
Not at all, nope.
Okay. Why is that?
It seems like whenever I turn it on, you either heard about something sad or tragic. The last time I turned it on, tornadoes, shootings, it's stuff it drags you down, it's pessimistic, and I'd rather not get myself involved with that.
Okay. And so your contact or knowledge of this case is just basically when you briefly were surfing the TV stations and stuff, you came across it periodically?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I remember the day when I first heard about it. I won't forget it. I came home from the gym and I was excited. I got a one-arm pull-up. I've been training for months. And I just wanted to relax, kick back. So I turned on the TV. And I forget the news station, but I heard the name, Zimmerman. Okay, and at the time, it didn't hit me. Changed the channel. About 4 or 5 channels later, again, I see it. Breaking news, Zimmerman, Trayvon. And I was web surfing, I saw nothing, so I'm like, okay, I'll listen to it. And from what I got, I know this is going to sound bad, but I didn't care about it. It didn't involve me, it didn't involve anyone I know about, so I'm like, okay, what happened sucks, but after that, I didn't pay any attention to it, just turned it off, went on with my day.
Was that left-handed or right-handed?
Both. I can do
Okay.
it. Yeah, so.
All right.
Yeah.
And in terms of, it was a local TV station that you're seeing that?
Yeah.
And you're right there. They've got speakers all over. They got microphones
okay.
all over, so you're able to pick it up. You're fine. Just feel comfortable.
Okay.
In terms of where you were, would it have been local and national, I gather?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember what station?
News 13?
Okay. And from the national news, which one do you remember?
CNN.
Okay. And do you recall if it was the same night that it happened or the following day? And we're going back to February 2012. It was around the time it happened?
Sounds right. I remember that I was still working at a small private school, so yeah, sounds right.
Okay. What do you remember first hearing about the case? What do you remember being said on the news about the case?
Mr. Zimmerman, he was, I guess you would call him a community patrol guard. And I forget they were apartments or like community homes. I don't remember what they were. Something Lakes. It's not coming to me. But I remember he was patrolling the area. And from what I gathered, he saw a suspicious figure. At the time, I didn't know that was Trayvon Martin. But next thing, some altercation, something happened. I don't know what happened. And tragic that Trayvon Martin, he died. But the part that I don't understand is how did he die? I mean, some altercation happened. Did he pursue him? I don't know. Did Trayvon come after him? I don't know. I don't know the details. So I can't make a judgment call if you don't know the facts.
Sure, sure. And again, we're not allowed to tell you what the facts are unless you got to wait, I should say, until you're a juror to hear the facts. My question is, what do you remember from the media, their aspect or their take on it? You remember what they said other than that?
They said
You know, they have opinions sometimes.
Yeah, they said the same stuff in different ways. Zimmerman, he saw a suspicious figure, he pursued him, and then I heard that Trayvon Martin, he came after Zimmerman, and I remember Skittles. That's
Okay.
really, and then after that, I didn't pay much attention.
And after that all, you didn't pay much attention at all?
No, it's after a while, I just got sick of hearing it. I know it sounds cruel, but I didn't want to hear about it anymore.
How about when you recently got a jury summons, did you think, oh, I might be on the jury?
When I got the jury summons, it's funny because I just got hired at Mary Prep. And I was like, oh no, this isn't going to sit well with my employer.
And let me just interrupt you if I could a second.
Yeah.
You've filled out the questionnaire, and some of this the court has determined is going to be confidential, so...
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's not a problem. But anyways, I got the jury summons, and it didn't hit me at the time. Okay, I might be going to this, Mr. Zimmerman, I might be going to something else. And then I believe it was Monday when all the attorneys came in, Mr. Zimmerman came in, I'm like, I recognize that face. Where's Zimmerman? I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to probably have to sit through this.
Okay. So you didn't do any research once you found out that you were a potential juror, like to see what cases were going on, what case you may appear on?
No?
Okay. Do you interact at all in social media? Do you partake in social media like Facebook, other kind of stuff?
I have an old MySpace. I do have a Facebook. I'm on there every now and then for arm wrestling stuff.
Okay.
One-arm pull-up training,
Sure.
That's why I'm on there. And other than that, I don't have a large group of friends. I only have 2 or 3 close friends
Sure.
that I talk to.
My question is, when you open up your Facebook account to interact with people, do you see any news, or have you seen any news regarding George Zimmerman or this case?
No.
Okay. Have you looked at any websites dedicated to this case, either for George Zimmerman or for Trayvon Martin?
Nope.
Okay. How about national news? Did you listen to any national news regarding this case? Not at all. Fox, CNN. You mentioned CNN, I think.
CNN, yeah. It's because of my dad. He sees it every now and then, but I have a dark view about the media.
What is that? You just don't believe what they say, or you just? I know you mentioned in terms of pessimism, but
Yeah, I tend to be like one of those. I don't want to say conspiracy because people are like, ooh, conspirator, but I try to avoid the media.
on purpose.
Yeah, literally. I don't want to be brainwashed. That's how I see it.
Okay. Since you don't want to be impacted by the media, do you on your own try to look at sites that may be more, if there is such a thing in terms of unbiased, more just straight facts?
No, most of what I got, the reason why I'm this way is because just family, friends, when I went to college.
Okay.
Very liberal professors there.
Okay. You didn't like him, I gather, from your reaction.
It's too far out there.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Now, have you discussed the case with family or friends?
No.
Nobody in your family's talked about the case, about their feelings about one
I'm very private about my life. What I do is what I do, and I don't want other people getting involved at all.
Okay. I'm assuming by the answers you've given so far that's why you were able to unequivocally say that you can keep an open mind and have not formed an opinion in this case. Is
Right.
that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember anything at all about the case other than what you've told us already? Do you remember any photographs that you would have come across on the media or on the internet about the case?
Not that I can think of, no.
How about any kind of videos or commentary about the case? Okay. How about do you, in terms of when you do turn on the TV, and not necessarily watch the news, but maybe it's ESPN or that, did you come across any commentary just briefly mentioning, they have alerts and all that kind of stuff?
Right. No, as of late, I've just been watching Netflix.
Okay. Have you heard of any commentary by lawyers or other people related to the case, or just national commentators about the case?
No?
You weren't curious at all about the case, even it happened in Seminole, you were not? Okay. Now, You mentioned family. How about friends? Have you talked to any friends about the case? Or
Nope.
has anybody expressed to you an opinion about the case?
Well, I've gotten friends who are like, yeah, he definitely did it. And I had, you know, I don't want to say they were or whatnot. I had one. I won't forget it because he was like, oh no, if someone was in your territory, you know, naturally you would want to protect it. And very colorful guy, you know. But other than that, just those two people, they stand out. It's like you have one on the end of the spectrum, another on the other end. And then I'm like, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I just don't care about it.
Okay.
That's what I told him.
So one person had, in terms of saying protecting territory, meaning like Zimmerman was protecting his territory?
Yeah,
or?
he was just guarding his turf. It's
And
like
what did you think of that?
Well, I mean, I can understand if I saw a person in my neighborhood, I didn't know who he was. I'll be naturally suspicious. I wouldn't go pursuing him, though. You know,
Okay.
probably call the cops or something.
Sure. Okay, and how about the other, you said the other side was somebody, I guess, advocating Trayvon Martin's side, or?
Yeah, it's, he was like, well, Trayvon Martin was just in the area, you know, he was like wearing a hoodie or something, and he was just walking through, and he didn't, guess he was intimidated by his presence, so he pursued him.
All right. So you had both sides, I guess, telling you about it, and you said you didn't form an opinion as a result of that, or did you? That sway you one way or the other?
It's, you can't make an opinion when you don't have the facts. I mean, that to me, they were both emotional, and I'm like a stoic guy. In my opinion, emotions are rather weak. You can't make decisions based on emotions. So you have one guy who's very aggressive, you know, he's upset, frustrated. And then you have another guy, he's laid back, he's like, yeah, he's just guarding the area. You know, so they were both emotional about it. So, and I don't tend to take people who are emotional seriously.
So in your opinion, in arriving at a decision, you would automatically disregard what people have told your opinions or what you limited knowledge of the news and rely on what actually happens in the courtroom?
Unless they're someone I look up to.
Okay. Is there anybody in that case that you would look up to that you would go for advice, or?
No.
You understand if you're picked as a juror, you can't go and consult the person you looked up to, whether it be, you know, a father figure or something like that. You couldn't go ask them their opinion. You
Right.
only have to
Yeah, I
rely on.
understand that.
Okay.
I've never been close with my father anyway, so.
Sure. Okay. Or other people that you
Yeah.
looked up to. How about you picked as a juror? You sit in the jury, one of those seats back there, and you start listening to the evidence, and then you seem to remember something a little different than what the witness is saying. Do you think you could leave that outside the courtroom?
Yeah, I'd definitely be able to. It's funny you say that because not too long ago I got in a discussion with one of my friends, and we both went to elementary school together. And he was telling me about this one story, but I remembered it differently. You know, it's just when you think that far ago, your brain fuzzes things up, so it's not reliable.
And my question is, if you remember something that came out in the media, if it doesn't come out in the courtroom, that means that it wasn't evidence. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. Do you have any issues about that?
No.
Okay. Do you remember hearing anything about Trayvon Martin, other than you mentioned a hoodie? Do you remember anything more about Trayvon Martin?
He had Skittles.
Okay. Anything else besides that?
Mm.
How about George Zimmerman? Anything other than he was a neighborhood watchman or something? Anything else besides that? No pictures or anything like that do you recall seeing? That's a no for the record, right? I see.
Right, yeah, that's a no.
Okay, all right. I gather in your questionnaire you mentioned you did not have any conflicts in terms of insurmountable hardship that you couldn't serve as a juror. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. You also mentioned one of the questions, and I don't know that we made privately, but let me see if I can ask you. In the last question, you remember what it was, and I don't want to get into who it is.
Gotcha.
You mentioned that you have a relative, and that relative's occupation, you wanted to bring it to our attention, that is a state defense, and obviously the judge. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I'm on purpose not referring to who that is. Do you understand? Since we're referring to you as B72, I'm going to call that person a relative of yours.
Gotcha.
But you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you think that relative's occupation in some way would interfere with you being able to serve as a juror?
Not at all. No, my relative, we've never been close. Not that we hated each other, but emotionally distant, I guess you could say. And he's always been, just like me, very private. That runs in our family. We don't.
So you don't believe that that relative's occupation in any way would interfere with you being able to sit as a juror? Have you ever listened to his opinions at all about the law or about other stuff like that?
He doesn't talk about his work life one bit. So.
Okay. You put it here, and again, without referring to what it is, why did you feel it was important to put it here?
It's, I'd imagine when you have a jury duty, you would want the court and everyone involved would want to know, okay, given their occupation, it's
Right.
irrelevant. And I felt that it's important. You would want to, you want to make sure you have the best person for the job.
You wanted to alert to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Yeah, because it's down the road, if the media found out about it, they might blow it up, take it out of
Gotcha.
proportion, and
Okay.
it gets messy.
Yes, sir. No, and we appreciate you doing that. I'm trying to keep it as vague as I can on purpose.
Got it.
Okay.
Gotcha.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, you do.
I have no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Just stay seated, Mr. West.
Afternoon.
Howdy.
My name is Don West. Myself and Mr. Romero represent George Zimmerman. You mentioned that you had recently started a job.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you worked at the place doing what you do that you indicated on the questionnaire?
Okay. Well, I started on the job as a new position. Before I worked as a program coordinator, and now I'm working as a maintenance technician. So, and when I got that maintenance technician, it's been 2 or 3 days that I've been working on it. And then, of course, my boss is like, oh, you got that. So we have a lot of work to do, but...
Is that in a particular department?
Well,
What?
the maintenance technician is like facilities. So anything, jack of all trades, if you will, if that's making sense.
Well, does it involve physically taking care of the property?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah. Lights, walls, whatever they need, I do.
Gotcha. And when this happened in February of 2012, were you employed with the same at the same school?
No, it was another smaller private school, Center Academy.
Okay. And how long? Let me just tell you what I'm getting at. Were there any periods of time after this event in February of 2012 where you weren't employed and might have had a lot more time to pay attention to the news?
Yeah, my term ended with a Center Academy May 24th or 25th, I think it was, and that's summer school. So I was looking for a new job, and career builder, monster, something hired, job postings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because at Seminole State at the time, one of my friends from the tutor center, he's like, hey, you know what, just, the word's not coming to me right now, but I was feeling like down. I was frustrated. I couldn't find a job, and I had bills to pay. So he's like, all right, check this, this, and this. I kept checking the websites, and then the one for Lake Mary opened up. And at the time, it said teacher. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have my bachelor's yet. But anyways, I applied for it, and then I get a call. Maybe 2 weeks later, I was at the Walmart. I was shopping with my dad. And I get the call, I take it. And next thing you know, I go for an interview, and I got it. So.
And that was in January of this year?
No. The summer of last year. So after February, it might have been June or July. I started August 9th because we had a luncheon at Lake Mary.
So you worked through the school year
Mm-hmm.
in 2012.
Right.
And then you didn't have that job anymore.
I don't want to object as to relevance at this time regarding publicity.
Okay, let's get this geared back into the publicity part of it.
Sure.
Thank you.
You left this position that you held in February of 2012 in late May.
Yes.
Okay. And then you were unemployed until August?
Until, yeah, August. I started
And-
August 9th.
And did you work days? My question's pretty simple. Were there periods of time where you had a lot more opportunity to watch the news or read about things happening?
More free time, yeah.
Okay. And what period was that?
What do you mean by what period?
What period of time between February of 2012 and today?
I still don't understand what you're asking.
Okay. What I was trying to get at was, I'll ask it this way. When you were unemployed, did you pay any more attention to the news than you do generally when you are working?
Nope. Gym. I do a lot of training for powerlifting and arm wrestling competitions. So when I'm not at the gym, I'm walking my dog or spending time with my mom.
When you do watch TV and get news on TV, that's from Channel 13?
Yeah, that's the only one I really watch, just for the weather forecast. They're usually news, weather, news, weather.
You had mentioned that your idea of what the case is about is that Mr. Zimmerman was a community patrol guard and that he was patrolling the area. What makes you think that from what you heard?
From what I remembered, when I turned it on, remember News 13, I just heard the name, I changed it. I think it was at CNN 2425. I remember it being CNN. He said he was like a community patrol guard. He was just patrolling the area, and he saw a suspicious figure. And then,
Are you saying that the information that led you to believe that Mr. Zimmerman was a patrol guard who was patrolling the area came from CNN?
Yeah.
And when do you think that would have been in time?
Early March of last year? Sounds right.
Early March of 2012?
I'd say so, yeah.
Okay. And when about was it that you said you got sick of hearing about this case and basically tuned it out?
Man, about 3 days later, because I was turning on Zimmerman, Trayvon, Skittles. It felt like I was just getting the same information. It's just they were telling in different ways. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't interesting to me. I don't find this news. And this is my pessimistic point of view. It's like there's shootings every day. I don't see what the big deal is about the case. So I just, at the time, I only gave it 1 or 2 thoughts, and I just moved on.
Okay. During that time frame that you were paying a little more attention to it, were you aware of any sort of public demonstrations or protests?
Objection is interjecting facts as opposed to asking the witness what he remembers.
I'm sustained.
Your Honor, I've not indicated in any way who or what cause.
We don't even know if he is aware of any other events occurring
Yes,
at all.
that's-
And you suggested to him that something had occurred, and that is what the objection is to the suggestion, instead of asking him what does he remember occurring. And that's what I sustained.
That's the predicate of every question that I have, is whether the prospective juror is aware from his exposure to the media if certain events took place or facts concerning
Since
the
it
case.
hadn't been objected to before, I hadn't had to make a ruling. It's now objected to, and I'm making a ruling. Thank you.
Did you read anything or hear anything on TV about any demonstrations or protests?
You can ask him what he has heard or read or what he knows.
Have you heard or read anything related to demonstrations or protests?
So I still answer. And I don't do much reading. I really don't. As far as demonstrations, like protests, I mean, I'm not sure where you're getting at. I don't remember. I'm telling you what I remember. Zimmerman was a patrol guard. Something Lakes. I forget what the name is, but it's going to bother me. Something Lakes. He saw a suspicious figure, and I don't know what happened. There was an altercation. That's all I know. I remember hearing there was an altercation, And unfortunately, Trayvon Martin, it's sad that that went down like that, but that's all I know. I don't remember there being demonstrations of any sort.
Do you remember hearing anything about this case in the news that suggested there may be racially?
You know, you understand objection. I would object to.
Let counsel approach, please.
This happens sometimes.
Gotcha.
Maybe I should be more precise in my question. Are you saying that you only heard or something about this case that one time when you were channel surfing and you heard it several times in the same hour?
Yeah, same hour, next same stuff. So
I know you said it seemed to be the same thing over and over again. Are you saying that all of that happened on one day or over a period of time?
no, over a period of time.
From at or about the time it first hit the news until about when were you aware of what was going on?
When I first heard about it, I did the one-arm pull-up. Okay, then I heard what I heard, turned it off. Next day, went to gym, did my thing, and went to work. Came back home, channel surfing, same thing. So afterwards, I was like, okay, if this is gonna be going on for a while, I don't want to deal with it. So just turn off the TV.
All right, and then after that, now we're talking within the first 2 or 3 weeks after this happened?
Yeah, first 2 or 3 weeks. Oh man, it's gym competitions. I didn't watch any TV whatsoever. Like none.
Okay, just help me understand the time frame better.
Okay,
You,
so early March, I don't know, the first week of March is when I first heard about it. The time when I got the one-arm pull-up. And then about 3 days afterwards, tops, okay, I stopped watching TV. So if I had to give you a date, maybe March 8th, 9th. Yeah, it's about the latest. And then afterwards, I just went out in my life. I didn't care to hear any more about it or to see any TV. I was busy before gym, my competitions. So
okay. Are you saying that after March 8th, first couple of weeks in March, that you haven't heard or read anything about the case?
Definitely not reading. No, I don't do any reading whatsoever. No newspapers or any books, anything like that. And then maybe about a month after is when I had the two friends who were like, hey, you know, how do you feel about this? I'm like, oh, whatever, I don't care. So, and then that must happen April, like April 2nd, April 3rd. So,
Okay. So the two friends you were talking about, this was 3 people in a discussion about the
no.
case?
It's I'll be more clear with that. I won't give his name, but we always hang out. We go to Steak and Shake a lot. It's like girl time, and we're just talking guy stuff, girls and whatever. And then he brings it up. I don't remember the lead way into it, but he was very passionate about it. You know, he was upset or whatever.
And what was he passionate about specifically?
Oh, about how Zimmerman and Trayvon, Zimmerman was in the wrong for doing that, and Trayvon was innocent. Okay, he was passionate. He felt like, you know, poor kid. And then,
And what did he tell you that you heard that he thought Zimmerman had done that made him responsible for what happened?
oh, he thought Zimmerman just straight up shot him.
Walked up to him and shot him?
No, he just said he shot him. He didn't say, oh, he walked up to him and shot him. He just said he shot the poor kid.
Okay. Did he describe for you any of the circumstances that he was taking into account when he thought that Mr. Zimmerman was guilty?
No, he's a very blunt guy. He said what's on his mind. So he was like, yeah, Zimmerman just shot the kid. And then I was like,
Okay. What did you think about that?
I was sitting in my shake. I didn't care about what he was talking about. So
Did you believe him?
no,
Is this a guy whose opinion you value?
No, I mean, like I said, he's a close friend of mine. He's like a bro. But he's the last person I go to for advice. Or I wouldn't, no.
All right, so you don't really take what he says seriously, no matter what his opinion is?
There you go, right. That's how
You just write that one off. Okay. How about the other guy that was there?
I don't remember where we were hanging out, but he wasn't there with us. It was just my friend and I, my friend who was the passionate one about, okay, Trayvon and Zimmerman was wrong, the passionate one. The other one laid back. I'm trying to remember if where we were at the time. I'm not sure, but the other one, he's someone whose opinion that I will value more because we went to school together and he helped me become a math tutor and whatnot. So, but he was like more laid back about it. He was like, okay, you're just patrolling your area, you know, someone you see suspicious and a place you normally don't see the person, naturally you'd be aroused for your suspicions. Okay? And he was very laid back in describing it.
Did he talk with you about what he thinks happened that led up to Trayvon Martin being shot?
No, he's just like, okay, well, he just 100% believed that Zimmerman was right.
By right, meaning in self-defense or some right in some other way?
I don't know what he's. I don't want to say by self-defense because again, there was an altercation. I don't know what happened. There was something happened that led Zimmerman to do that Trayvon Martin. I don't know what happened. He didn't go into detail either. He was just like, yeah, you know, he's watching this area, and I think he took it in the way like it's almost like in your yard, and they're in your property, so you have like the right to. I don't want to say shoot, but you have the right to like, hey, get off my property, you know.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear any information in this case about how this event started? The altercation you talked about. Any more information about
No,
what the
it's just, I kept hearing that word thrown around, altercation, altercation, altercation. And that's where I remember, and that's the way I still see it. Something happened, okay, from when he saw Trayvon to when, you know, Trayvon, he passed away. Something happened in there, and
Is there anything based upon what you know of the case from the limited media or conversations with friends that you think George Zimmerman did wrong?
I don't know what, I won't be able to give you a clear answer. I mean, I don't know.
I'm not asking for your opinion on the facts of the case because obviously you couldn't have the facts for that kind of decision without being on the jury. What I want to know, though, is what you believe based upon what you've heard outside this courtroom.
I don't have any opinion about that. Something happened. Okay, well, what happened? Because I haven't made a decision if that's what you're asking.
Right. Are you leaning one way or another as to whether this was self-defense or not?
Oh.
You think it could be self-defense?
Action, Your Honor, improper.
Sustained. Asking a potential juror to comment on the issues in the case, that's not appropriate.
That's only based upon what he knows.
Sustained.
Have you decided in any way that it wasn't self-defense?
Same objection, Your Honor. Improper.
Sustained.
We have a move.
Yes, you may.
Anything else that you remember about the facts of the case from the media that you haven't specifically said here today?
No, everything I told you is what I remember. Yeah.
One brief area. I know you have worked at schools over the last year or so. have there been any events at the schools where you've worked in connection with this case that you've been a part of?
No.
Have you had any conversations with students about this case?
No, the students, they were always talking about, they were teenagers. They were talking about girls, parties, that sort of thing. Nothing ever came up about Zimmerman I don't think they would care to listen to that kind of stuff. So I don't remember hearing anything now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Just remain seated for just a moment, and counsel, when you're ready, please approach. Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and bring in the next juror.
E22, Your Honor.
Please be seated. And you are going to be referred to from here on out as Juror E22. And the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire that you filled out Monday morning. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, juror number E22.
Thank you.
You've written down here on the questionnaire what you recall in terms of the evidence that you heard about in this case. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you've got on here that the source was the newspapers and TV?
Correct.
What newspapers? Newspaper, excuse me. I don't know if you plural or singular.
Well, it's primarily the Orlando Sentinel.
Okay. And your TV sources were that local or national?
Primarily local.
Do you recall what station?
The big three.
Okay. Kind of whichever one what you were looking at?
Wherever.
Okay. And not the national one?
Well, I'm sure I heard some,
Sure.
but it was not on a daily basis.
When you first heard about it, was it at the beginning, and when I say the beginning, back in February of 2012?
That is when I first heard of it, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did you keep up with it, or did you periodically check up on the story?
It was not a daily. It was checking in maybe 3 or 4 times a week to see, but it came on as part of the news that I was watching. So.
You're just a routine news watcher, and when they came up, you would see it at that time?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you do any particular research to try to find out more information on the internet or anything like that?
No, I did not.
You don't partake in Facebook and all of that stuff?
I do not.
Okay. So you're limited, your knowledge was limited to just what you saw on TV and then what you read in the newspaper?
That is correct.
Okay. Would you agree that the newspaper and TV sometimes does not get everything right in terms of what they broadcast?
I would agree.
Okay. And the question is, can you agree that whatever you saw on TV or read in the newspaper, you can set aside and leave it outside the courtroom?
I think so. I would agree.
Do you understand the law requires for people to make a decision only on the facts that come out in the trial itself?
I understand that.
Do you have any issue about that? Do you have any doubt in your mind that you can do that?
No, I think I can do that.
Okay. What you've also got here is that heard of the shooting of T. Martin by G. Zimmerman, and that T. Martin was unarmed, black and young, and that G. Zimmerman had a gun, is white and Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
Or white/Hispanic, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you remember any details about what happened or what the media said happened? Do you remember any details about what they said happened?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything come to mind right now in terms of what the media said happened, in terms of how this started or anything like that?
Well, that one individual, George Zimmerman, was following Trayvon Martin,
Okay.
and that's how it basically seemed to have started.
All right. Okay. Now, did you watch any of the proceedings in court? You know, that was broadcast periodically. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't, in terms of what occurred in court.
Periodically, I would have seen something if it was on the news and I happened to be watching.
Do you remember anything about any of the court proceedings at all?
Nothing specific that I did.
Nothing just comes to mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember in your watching of the case on TV or reading about it in the newspaper, you remember seeing any pictures about anything related to the case?
Yeah, saw pictures.
What pictures do you remember that come to mind right now?
Well, saw pictures of Trayvon Martin, various ones, and pictures of George Zimmerman, the attorneys.
The attorneys?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you listen to any commentators talking about the case, both locally and nationally?
Yeah, as they were, some of them doing their news stories, yes, they would have other people who were, I guess, experts, offering opinions.
Okay. Do you necessarily take what those so-called expert, I'm using that word, do you take that at face value as they're telling you that you have to believe everything they say?
That's their opinion. No, it's...
So you would agree that those are opinions that you can disregard, and more specifically at a trial, you have to disregard. Mm-hmm. Do you have any question about that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you recall any other events or actions related to the case that come to mind at this time, other than what you've told us so far?
Well, I remember the marches that were part initially of the coverage on the news.
Did that have an impact on your opinion one way or the other? And I know I should state you have no opinion, but
yeah.
How did you feel about the marches that took place?
It was clearly a volatile issue, and that's what was riveting.
Okay. I'm assuming you did not participate in any of those marches?
I did not.
Okay. Aside from the media, both locally and nationally, and newspaper, I should say media, TV, and newspaper, have you talked to people, friends or family about the case?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have those individuals expressed their opinions about the case?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you express opinions about the case yourself when talking to those individuals?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall what your opinions were about when you were discussing with those individuals?
Yeah. One of the opinions that I expressed was that I did feel that initially the police should have been a bit more proactive in their interaction. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you say the police should have been more active in terms of full investigation, or what I shouldn't
full investigation is what my opinion was. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What you heard from relatives or friends sway you in any way in arriving at a decision in this case?
No, it was up for debate, and that's
right.
it.
It was a debate between you or other people?
Yeah, I mean, we're expressing our opinions to each other.
Sure. Yeah. And that opinion you expressed about the police investigation that they did, would that sway you in any way? And my point is, can you agree to rely on the facts that actually come into this courtroom?
Yeah, I can agree to rely on the facts as heard here. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In other words, you don't have a secret agenda here. Let me get on the jury and I'm going to vote a certain way, but I'm going to answer things now so I'll get on the jury.
No, I don't have a secret agenda.
Okay. Any other place that you can recall or any other triggering events that you would have had discussions with other people? You mentioned family and friends and the media. Any other sources that you obtained information about the case that you can think of? I may have covered everybody, family, friends, and media. Okay, all right. And I gather in answering completely or responding to the questionnaire, you realize in terms of conflicts that you have to be setting aside some time. The judge hasn't decided whether a jury will be sequestered or not. You can abide by that. Is that correct?
Correct, I can.
Okay. Let me have a withdrawal. Just a few follow-up questions. You mentioned at one point you expressed an opinion that police should have been more proactive. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Regarding that, can you set that aside, your feelings at that time about that?
Yes, I can. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In other words, that cannot interfere in any way in your decision. Do you understand that?
I understand that.
Do you have any question about being able to set that aside?
No.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions.
Afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good, doing well. The process that we're doing today is just to find out more information that you know about the case before you get here. because obviously there's a huge difference between what you've heard outside and what's going to be what we call relevant or admissible evidence here. So you want to sort of see what it is you know about. So my question is going to be with that sort of as a filter. So as I go through this, if anything that I say or anything that Mr. Del Rionda said brings up more information to discuss, please let me know so we can go over it. How long have you lived in the Seminole County area?
12 years, I think. Yeah.
And you get most of your news is from just I think you said the big three, the local 3 stations?
Correct.
Is that the local 3 stations or the national 3 stations that are seen locally?
Well, the local ones, and I do watch them afterwards to cycle into, if I'm not doing something else, it'll cycle over to the national news on that station.
So you might be watching the NBC local, it rolls over to the NBC nightly news,
Correct.
and you'll get some information from there as well?
Correct.
And also from the Orlando Sentinel?
Correct.
Do you subscribe to that?
I do subscribe to the Sentinel.
And have, at least since this event, which is back in February 2012?
Yes.
So, and read it most days?
Most days, yeah.
The Orlando Sentinel has covered this case fairly extensively. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
And I think that you said 3 or 4 times a week you sort of hear or read something about this. Would that include the Orlando Sentinel?
Yes.
In any of the stations that you have watched, both the big 3, local or national, or the Orlando Sentinel, would you acknowledge that they have different perspectives on what they report?
I would agree with that, yes.
Do you ever watch other stations like Fox or CNN or MSNBC?
I do occasionally watch CNN. Not that often, but I do watch it, yeah.
Did you notice any particular way that the Orlando Sentinel was reporting the case?
No, I won't say that they had a particular way of reporting it.
Or a slant to their reporting, particularly to this case?
No, I can't say that I have found them to have a particular slant.
Did you notice any perspective that was given by the media in general during the first couple of weeks after Trayvon Martin's passing?
During the first couple of weeks, there did seem to be an indication that this was an unarmed youth that was killed by someone who was following him for not good reasons.
Okay. Did you notice whether or not that fact scenario was what was fueling some of the media coverage of this?
I think so, yeah.
You had mentioned in your answers to your questionnaires a couple of things. Well, in your questionnaire, you noted that Trayvon Martin was black and George Zimmerman was white or Hispanic. Did you notice whether or not the media was focusing on those differences as part of their coverage?
Well, initially, yes. I mean, he was described as a white male, and Trayvon is a black youth male. And after some, I don't know what, but eventually it seemed to migrate over to this broader description, and they explained as much as they could why they broadened the description, reflecting on his family. I said, okay, well, that seems to fill in the picture a little better.
I understand. It's a great insight, but can you explain to me what you mean a little bit more by that?
His parentage, so that he had a father who I think is white and a mother who is not. So that would be the Hispanic or Latino portion of his heritage.
And you're speaking, of course, of Mr. Zimmerman,
Yes,
and how
correct.
they broadened out his cultural background from white to whatever else you just described.
Correct.
And you also mentioned that, in that you saw that change through your watching the media coverage of it?
Watching and reading.
Yeah. You also mentioned that there was a concern that you noticed with how Sanford police handled that matter.
Correct.
What did you notice as the concern?
Well, the concern was that the event occurred, and it seemed to me at the time that a presumption was made, whereas instead of taking George Zimmerman in and asking him additional questions at the station and booking him, that did not occur. At least from what I heard and read, it seemed like there was a lapse there. Something should have happened that didn't happen as a consequence of the initial act.
And did you note the media to have covered that in a way that suggested to you that it was because Trayvon was black and George was white, as it was first reported, that impacted on the decision not to arrest him?
Well, some certainly did suggest that was the case, yeah.
And did you get the feel from your review or reading of the media that that was the presentation that was being made?
Well, that was the suggestion that they were kind of leading the reader down the road to. That was my impression.
Tell me then, with that initial view of the outcropping of what happened that night, how you felt about that.
In reading what their take on it was?
And reading on the take being that George Zimmerman wasn't arrested because he was white and Trayvon Martin was black.
Well, my reading on it was, well, we need some more investigation here, and part of that, I think, should have been that they should have kept this man and looked at the whole expanse of what happened, instead of perhaps coming to a conclusion before they knew more of what had happened.
The conclusion being to not arrest him.
Correct.
As you continued then to notice this being played out in the media during the times that you would review either the Orlando Sentinel or the locals of the National, did you see, in your mind, was the media, or to what extent was the media continuing that perspective? And if it changed, when you noticed a change? And that's a really, you understand what I'm asking?
Specific to the white and black dynamic? The only time it seemed to change was when they broadened the heritage picture of George Zimmerman. That's when it shifted slightly.
Did you see any change in the media regarding the Sanford Police Department's handling of it? Did you note any of that?
I can't say I noted. They kind of stopped talking about it to some extent. Yeah, but I can't see that anything changed in how that was being reported, but they just didn't talk about that part of it as much any longer.
Having now viewed it over the, let's say, almost 16 months since the event, how have you noted that the media has changed, if they've changed, with their coverage of this event?
I think that it's a more tempered approach now. It's not as inflamed, but kind of like they're standing and waiting for some inflammation to occur, but I think now it's not as inflamed. That's my perception of it, and it may be because time has passed, I don't know.
Sure. And again, all of this, I'm trying to get a good feel for your perspective and how it came, or how you came to that perspective from the media. So, We talked a little bit about the Orlando Sentinel and your perspective on them, not to drill through too much deeper to all of the other local stations and the national, but with what the conversation we just had about the media, is that sort of the generic change that you noticed, or across all the medias that you had an opportunity to look at? There wasn't one that sticks out as being different, or is there?
No, I think I would paint it as generic.
Okay. Not to steal a word, I don't even know which channel it is, not to steal a catchphrase from them, but is what you're saying that at least over the year and a half of this, that it's become more balanced or more...
Yeah, I think I could use the word tempered, but yes,
tempered.
I would say I think it is a bit more balanced now, and I think part of it is maybe because some time has passed.
In addition then to the local national media and Orlando Sentinel, Mr. Del Rionda asked you about other inputs that you have either to you and then back out from you as far as opinions. The question that you answered in the jury questionnaire is what we call sort of an ultimate opinion question. That is, have you formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence? And that's sort of the ultimate question in all this. But my question of you, and I think you answered it to a certain extent to Mr. Del Rionda, is other opinions, maybe not an opinion of that ultimate issue, but just other opinions that you formed about this case. So I want to ask a few more things about that, okay? In talking to your family members, can you tell me just a bit more, when you say they express their opinions and you would express more, tell me a bit more about that.
Well, it's not primarily family members, it'd be friends.
Okay.
During the times when there were demonstrations early on, after the event occurred, that was a time when, because the event was so widely covered by the media, that it was an opportunity for a lot of interaction to occur between friends and whomever else. And so, yeah, there was discussion between friends, myself, and others regarding what had happened, what we thought had happened, what we had read had happened, and it was basically a sharing to some extent of information. Well, I heard that, and then, well, that other group said this, and, but I think at the heart of it, we all realize it's early on. We don't know what happened. Something happened, but, and everyone is getting information from somewhere, but it was untested information.
And the protests that you speak of, you're talking about some of the demonstrations in Sanford?
Correct.
They happened, was it your perspective that they happened early on in this overall process of 16 months?
Yes.
Do you think, and again, not to put words in your mouth, was that happening at a time before the media became, your words, more tempered about what was happening and not happening?
Oh, yeah. At the time, the media was not, in my opinion, not as tempered during the demonstrating phase.
Did it then seem to you and your friends that the matter was more opposed to George Zimmerman and favorable to Trayvon Martin as the media was covering it?
Coupled with those demonstrations, I would say yes.
Sure.
Okay, yeah.
How did that media influence, and I'm going to call it media bias, just for the purpose of this question or two, how did that media bias affect the opinions of your friends and your opinion when you were having these discussions about your opinions about the matter?
Well, one of the things that came up was that looking at other events that had happened in our lives, kind of tempering it with, let's not jump the gun. And that phrase came up quite a few times because, if you live long enough, you know that whatever happens initially, what comes out of it, it's going to take a little bit more exploration to see what the whole thing, whatever the thing is, was about, what all the parts of that puzzle are. And so while you might have an opinion in the beginning, it's probably not the one you're going to have at the end because you have more information to base it on. So while we debated, if you want to call it that, or just shared information, I think we were all steady enough to realize that more is going to come out of this.
If I asked you, those people who you've had these discussions with, and again, I guess we'll say it primarily to the time early on, when you were talking about the discussions you had with friends, what percentage of those conversations and opinions sort of followed the media bias, in effect, were more favorable to the perspective that George Zimmerman had done something wrong or that Trayvon Martin had not? If I ask you for a percentage of those conversations or opinions.
I can say the majority.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay. And back then, how did the media, and again, I'm using bias just to focus on the conversation. I don't want to just hammer it as them being completely biased, but how did that media bias affect your opinion?
I noticed it. I was not ignorant of it, but I also realized that there's going to be more. But the initial feeling I had was that the police should have been more interactive. They should have been more proactive in dealing with the situation early on.
Did any of that spill over onto your opinion of Mr. Zimmerman?
No, because at that point it was in the hands of the police.
Right.
Yeah.
It was mainly a focus on SPD's actions or inactions.
Correct.
I began this by saying that the primary purpose of this inquiry is to be certain that you can both identify the difference, sounds simplistic to say it that way, but identify the difference between what you've heard before the trial and what you've heard during the trial. More importantly is to make sure that what you've heard before the trial, that we're not going to try and wipe your memory clean, is just not going to impact your opinions or your decisions in the courtroom. So in that context, if the majority of your friends had the opinion back then or still have it now, based upon media perspective or whatever, of a certain view, and the evidence suggested a different view, how would you handle that?
Well, I'd have to go with what the evidence suggests.
Any concern, were that to be your decision, of defending that position to the friends who seemingly may have a differing view?
Well, I don't see that I would have to defend it. I mean, you offer it, and it's on the table.
Maybe it's because I'm married. I tend to have to defend my positions no matter what they are. So I just thought maybe you would have an opportunity then to have to say to somebody, yes, I voted this way. And then you'll say, well, why? And then I'm just curious whether or not, based upon those predispositions that those friends may have, that you'd be able to, or that you'd feel comfortable in a position of having to explain your decision.
Well, yeah, if I were free to do so, yes, I would be able to explain. I mean, to get to a decision, I would have to use reason, and so, I would have a construct to say, I got here by this information, by this path.
Okay. Based, at least in part, on what I'm terming media bias, and obviously because of why we're here today, dealing with pretrial publicity, do you carry any concerns with you of being able to sit as a juror in the case because of any potential aftermath of anything regarding your verdict in this case?
Well, I don't have any specific fears, but, I would hope generally that people would be respectful and nonviolent, but I don't have any specific fears for my own safety, no.
You had mentioned that it was, I don't know if it came specifically from the media or if it was just an opinion of yours, that I think your words were that this event is quite a volatile issue. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you mean by that and where that came from.
Did I answer that in reference to the demonstrations, or?
I thought you had, yes, ma'am.
Okay. The fact that people were demonstrating indicated a level of emotion that was heated, and that it can easily sway other people to also become as agitated, as heated, as concerned, or as proactive as those folks who were out there demonstrating. That makes it volatile because others can easily take the sentiment that was being expressed and use it in very negative ways.
Has your opinion, since your first view of the case, tempered along with the tempering that you've noticed in the media? Or tell me how your opinion has either cemented or modified since your first perspective on it.
That first thread that I had, I still hold, and that is that the police should have behaved, they should have done more than they did initially, and I still hold that.
Mm-hmm. Has there been any, did you have an opinion of Mr. Zimmerman that was less balanced than it is today?
No, it is as balanced as it was. I really don't know anything more that I've heard in the media about George Zimmerman other than his ethnicity. Yeah, that's the only thing I can recall that has been added to that picture.
Okay. Are you aware from the media coverage whether or not that issue of the differing ethnicities has been drilled into by the media or any other information about this case?
Well, I mean, it seemed to have been presented with some fanfare, like, "Oh, we now know this," and this is a big thing, and let us. But I think that might have been part and parcel of that was the news item for the day, mm-hmm. and so it got a lot more attention. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about some of those issues that sort of hit some fanfare along the way, or just pieces of evidence or whatever it might be?
Well, I remember the debate or the discussions that ensued when the differing pictures of Trayvon Martin were shown, and I thought, well, okay, one camp had one picture and it seemed like another camp, and I'm being loose with my word here, had another picture. They had differing pictures of George Zimmerman, and one was a previous picture where he was a much larger person, and then he was a much more svelte kind of sized person. But again, those things got, I think, an inordinate amount of attention. And I understand why, but it just seemed it was a bit much.
Okay. Any other items like that? We've talked about different pictures. I won't go into them. Mm-hmm. They're just certain pictures of Trayvon Martin, let's say sort of along a different spectrum, mm-hmm. both age and maybe attitude. And the same thing with Mr. Zimmerman?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. Any other specific things that sort of raised to the, above the waves a little bit that caught your attention?
Yeah, when they played in the media, when it was shared the call, the information, I think the person who called 911 and the person in the neighborhood, and playing some of that conversation with the dispatcher. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you have a chance to listen to that
yes.
when it was played?
Mm-hmm.
Did that cause any reaction in you?
Well, it was just shock that this person I think it was a woman in her home, went through this, that she heard someone get killed. She heard a gunshot, and that's got to be.
And that was a gunshot that you can actually hear yourself when you listen to the tape?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if I asked you, I won't ask you for 3 more things, so we'll say that you've already answered 2. With about one more thing that sort of sticks out, that's something that you noted or noticed about this case that caught your attention. So we've now talked about the varying pictures. Was there more than one tape that you listened to or heard in the media?
There might have been, but the one that sticks out is this woman who called 911.
We are hesitant to prompt you with specific pieces of evidence. No. You're doing fine. I'm just telling you that I need to be cautious. We hesitate to prompt you with particular pieces of evidence, but can you think of any other tape or information, audio information that you remember about this case?
There was information regarding a conversation that Trayvon Martin was supposed to have had with, I think, his girlfriend. Okay. And there was, I don't know what was said during that one, but that was something that also spiked interest, I think. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Anything specific that you can recall of that conversation to the extent that you're aware of it?
Well, he seemed to be speaking with her right up until the point of the actual encounter. And so that was interesting. Okay.
And there have been a lot of coverage, there has been a lot of coverage of this case, both in the media we've talked about and also on TV for not just particular to the case, but to the actual proceedings here. Have you taken any time to watch any of those proceedings?
No.
There has been some recent proceedings regarding what you just talked about, the 911 call. Are you at all familiar with that issue that's being addressed right now regarding that call?
No.
Okay. I'm almost done, but before I finish, I'm going to ask if my conversation with you here, just for the past few moments, has raised any questions that you have or brought back to mind another memory or something that we can discuss here. Because, again, much rather talk about it now and get it on the table so that they know it's not going to be troublesome later. Anything else that you can think of that we haven't talked about?
Not that I can think of.
We just have 1 minute then, okay? Go ahead. First question I told you was just making sure that you can be addressed with only what's in the courtroom here today. And it's a question I've asked of a few jurors. First of all, you agree that you should only listen and decide upon what the judge tells you should, correct? She's going to give you what we call jury instructions and advise you what you should be listening to, how to apply what you've listened to the law. If some other issue comes up for you, or even the ones that we've talked about, and if you walk into that jury room with some of the thread that you talked about, that SPD, probably should have handled this thing differently. But nothing comes up in the courtroom about that. So it's an issue for you, but for whatever reasons that the court and we decide on, it's not an issue that we put before you. Any concern that you would have with leaving an issue like that outside the courtroom and not letting it impact on how you view the case?
I would be okay leaving it outside and not having it impact the case.
Okay. And what about if another juror had a similar concern, where they even brought up in the very jury room that you would be in and said, I don't know exactly what happened with this, but what I do know is that SPD, they, and then just said whatever they said. How would you handle that juror in light of an instruction a judge might give you that you're only supposed to decide the case on what comes from the witness box?
Well, but that's just it, We're only supposed to decide based on what we have heard in that room. And so that would not be part of the decision-making process.
Thanks very much for the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please stay seated for just a moment, and counsel, when you're ready, approach the bench. Bobby. Deputy Jarvis will bring you to where you need to go next, and Deputy, if you'll please bring in the next juror. Thank you.
Your Honor, B as in Bravo, 87.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. You're hereby referred to as Juror B87, and the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you some questions about the questionnaire that you filled out on Monday morning. We're going to start with Mr. De La Ronda. Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. We've had an opportunity to read the questionnaire that you filled out on Monday.
Okay.
And so I want to follow up with some questions regarding the media that you were exposed to and tell us a little bit about that if you could. So this part of the question is just limited to that. You've got on here that you heard about the struggle between George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin that resulted in Trayvon Martin getting shot and killed. Okay. Your source of that, was that from local news or national news, or both?
Pretty much all local news.
Okay. And local news, TV or newspaper or both of them?
Both.
Okay. Do you recall what stations, in terms of local stations, you would have listened to and seen some stories about this case?
2, 6, 9, 18, 35, 65.
Okay. So you cover all of them, whatever you have.
Those are the channels we watch.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the newspaper, would that have been the Orlando Sentinel?
Correct.
Okay. Your gathering of information on this case, what is it at the beginning stages and throughout? In other words, this happened back in February of last year. Would that have come to your mind or to your attention at that time?
Pretty much throughout, because it's pretty much on all,
Sure.
It seems like it's covered like every other day or at least
Yes,
once
sir.
a week.
Okay. And my question is, was your focus or your attention on it at the very beginning more, and then as time progressed less, or did you follow it throughout?
Probably less going through,
And I apologize, I've already asked you this, but in TV purposes, did you also watch it on national news too?
I wouldn't be able to recall whether, probably flipping through,
Okay.
maybe.
If you would have watched it on national news, do you recall what, was it CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox, or?
It would have to be like Fox or ABC or.
Okay. Aside from reading or watching in terms of hard facts, did you also listen to any of the commentary or read commentary about the case? What I'm talking about, first you hear facts, this happened, and then you hear people talking about what happened and giving their opinions. Were you involved in hearing or reading any of those opinions?
I think it would be pretty hard to avoid.
I agree. Your feeling, looking back now in terms of the coverage by the media of this case, did you feel it was biased or slanted one way or the other at the beginning, and did it continue throughout? Or?
I really honestly wouldn't be able to.
Sure. In terms of the people you heard commenting about it, Do you recall whether there were local people or national people that were commenting about the case, or both?
Probably both. Yeah.
Okay. Right now, in terms of local, do you recall hearing, from memory standpoint, do you recall anything local in terms of who you would have heard from, who you would have seen on TV, in terms of attorneys or commentators about the case? Did any come to mind?
Not really. I mean, it's just so much information.
Sure.
You know, I couldn't really pinpoint any one individual that I was following. Or...
Okay. And how about from a national standpoint? Did you listen to any of the commentators? You know, Fox has certain commentators at night, especially. Did you listen to any of those individuals that have their own shows?
I didn't really say I'd watch an entire show about it. You know, it was just watch news every day.
Sure. Kind of just happen to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't sit there and follow the whole thing
Right.
from top to bottom.
In the process of following the news, did you, as Mr. Zimmerman got arrested, did you follow any court proceedings?
Probably a few here and there, just.
Sometimes they were apparently carried live. Did you watch any of those?
I don't really recall whether they were live. It probably wasn't, because usually I'm at work during the app days.
You didn't pull it up on your computer at work, or okay?
I don't have any time at work to pull into any computer work.
I wasn't trying to get you in trouble at work.
No.
As you were going along, at some point, I gather you came to an opinion. You formed an opinion, I should say.
I would say it'd be hard not to form an opinion of some sort on what's going on.
Okay. My question is, because you noted it and then you went and followed up and you said that you could put that aside, as I understood this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I would have to get all the information because, what you get from the news and everything else, they have their own opinions as well.
Right, and what I'm trying to, what both sides are trying to ascertain from you is, we're exposed to the media, you listen to it, but you really haven't seen or heard the actual evidence in the courtroom. Do you understand?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, of course I have my own opinions, and I think that, anybody who says that they don't would be,
Sure.
I mean, you have to have some kind of opinion.
No, I understand. My question is, what I'm trying to probe from you now, sir, is in terms of your opinion, do you recall when you arrived at your opinion, your initial opinion about the case, or your opinion that you still may have, do you recall when you arrived at that opinion?
Probably more in the beginning parts of hearing about it. And,
And what was your opinion, and let me, before you get to the final answer, is that opinion been consistent, or have you changed it as you've gone along?
I guess it might have changed a little bit, but fairly consistent,
Sure. In terms of when you first formed an opinion, what was your opinion?
I mean, it's really hard to... I guess I would need more information to really give an educated answer. I'd hate to, say, anything without having all the information in front of me.
Let me ask you this way. What were your first impressions about the case?
It's a tragedy, either way, both,
You say tragedy both you're talking about the Trayvon Martin and also George Zimmerman?
Either way, yeah. I mean, because, I don't have all the information. It's a tragedy. The whole thing's a tragedy.
Okay. Did you form some impressions regarding as to what had happened or not happened based on the exposure to the media that you had at the beginning? In other words, what I'm trying to ask you is, did you say, well, this is what happened, A must have happened, and then, B, or did you, based on just your immediate exposure, obviously?
I mean, it just, I don't know. I mean, it just sounded like sounded like a struggle happened,
Okay.
for whatever reason. I don't know what led up to it, or how it or came,
Sure.
led up to it. And I guess
Now-
I would need more information to really.
Sure. Okay. You mentioned that your opinion or impressions changed a little bit, but you're still pretty consistent. If it changed a little bit or modified a little bit, how did it do so?
Maybe in the ways that I would have to have more information to really to give you an educated answer on what I would think.
Okay.
What
So at some point you formed an opinion or came to some impression about the case, and then you realized that maybe you didn't have all the information? Am I understanding that correct? Or
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
okay. So in terms of those first impressions, what was it other than it being a tragedy for both?
I just, you hear information about either side, and you might hear information about one side one day, and then you hear more information about another side the other day. So it's like,
Yes, sir.
you might have one opinion one day, and then you hear a little more information about the other side, whether that information is 100% true or false. Like I said, I mean, you take that information and you would form an opinion whether it's true or false. I mean, you'd have to get the evidence, I guess, and go through the evidence. And
So as you were hearing, I
guess,
as you were hearing one side, you would kind of lean towards that side, and then you might hear something else and kind of go the other way. Or what I'm trying to find out from you is were you pretty much leaning this way, and then you would move a little bit?
I don't think I was really on one side or the other. I was just kind of listening to the information. I don't think I was really leaning fully on one side or the other, just because I don't know the whole story, and obviously I don't know if anybody that was a witness or.
In watching it on TV, did you hear any of, if there were any recordings about the case? In other words, any recordings that occurred during the before or after the shooting?
I think I've heard some recordings at one time, but
do you recall which recordings there were?
I don't really. I think it was maybe the 911 call or something like that.
And under the law, I'm not allowed to tell you, this is what happened. I need to find out from you what happened, or what you remember the media telling you what happened. Do you remember when you say 911 call? Do you remember what the call was about?
I honestly can't remember. I think at a point when it gets so overexposed, I kind of stopped paying attention.
And did you remember any photographs when you observed, when you were watching the TV or in reading in the newspaper? Do you remember looking at any photographs related to the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember seeing some photographs of
Do you remember
George Zimmerman, what he looked like after the incident.
Tell me, as best you can recall, what that photograph looked like.
I think he might have had some scratches or something from the struggle or whatever.
Okay. Do you remember, when you say scratches, do you remember what part of his body you would have observed?
I think it was something maybe on his face or head or forehead or something like that.
What were your impressions regarding that when you observed that?
There was a struggle.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Did you come to any other conclusions as a result of that?
No, I mean, because, like I said, I mean, it all depends on what led up to the situation. I mean, I don't like.
Okay. Any other photographs that you remember now that come to mind regarding the case that the media published?
I mean, obviously, Trayvon Martin, photographs of him.
Okay. Anything else that you can remember about photographs or recordings, if there were any more than the one you mentioned? Okay.
No.
All right. Do you recall in your review of or watching the media, do you recall anybody speaking about the case that was involved in the case?
No.
Okay. As a result of watching it on TV and living in this community, did you do any research on your own to try to find out more information? You know, some people go online and go on Google, and you know, some people become addicted to the case and then they do their own research.
No, I like even with other cases, you know, big cases in the past. It's not something that I really do. I'm not like a.
You're not one of those individuals that gets kind of like focused on a case.
Not really.
All right. Did you have any discussions with anybody at work about the case?
No.
Okay. How about with your family? Did you have any discussions with your family about their opinions about the case, one way or the other?
Mm-mm. No.
Okay. All right. Have you had any discussions with friends about the case?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you really haven't talked to anybody about the case at all?
Not really. No, nothing that I really sat down and talked about the case with anybody.
Well, there was
something happened. You know,
okay.
If we saw it in the news, oh well,
sure.
You know, wow, look at what happened. Obviously,
Sure.
we might have had some conversations when it first happened,
right.
But
okay.
other than that, you know, beyond like when it initially happened, I don't think anything was ever talked about beyond that.
Sure. And my question is, other than just bare minimum, somebody was killed. Any discussions about opinions about people expressing with friends opinions about what really happened and, you know, the media's?
I would say people had opinions, but I don't think I had any in-depth conversations beyond like, you know, like a passing conversation.
Do you recall the opinions that people expressed to you? Were they more favorable to George Zimmerman or more favorable in terms of George Zimmerman should be charged? Do you recall, if you could think back to the opinions that...
I think I've heard both sides.
Okay.
Both sides, yeah.
And when you were having discussions with these people, did you express an opinion to them at that time?
I would say that I'm always kind of like wait and see what really happened kind of person, you know.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that I had any strong opinions either way.
Okay. So on that question that you answered, when you put yes, then you had an opinion. Is this what you meant when you've been talking about?
I mean, yeah, I had an opinion on, you know, what as far as like what may have happened, but I don't have an opinion on, you know, but what may have happened is not what would happen.
You don't know what really happened because you weren't there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So in terms of your opinion as to what may have happened, what is that opinion?
I mean, it's, you know, I mean, I know that have heard that, you know, he's walking through the neighborhood late at night. You know, he was a security guard. I think I recall them saying that he may have reported it.
Okay.
He was told to not follow, I think.
Okay.
Obviously, you know, that didn't happen, you know, and he, you know, maybe thought he was doing the right thing by following, and apparently that, you know, didn't work out, you know, and it turned into a tragedy.
So when you say that your opinion, that's your what you were talking about?
That's just what I recall, you know, whether, you know, what led up to the whole situation, getting face-to-face, I have no idea, you know.
Okay. Under the law, if you're picked as a juror, you're required to make a decision only based on the facts.
Right.
What actually happened in terms of witness testifying or physical evidence. And obviously you're allowed to use your God-given common sense. And then you have to rely also on the instructions that the court will give you the law.
Right.
Do you think you could do that at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would definitely, you know, make the right decision according to the evidence, you know. I mean, obviously I can't go solely off of what TV gives you. I mean,
Sure.
I would have to see, like I said, I don't know all the evidence and know everything that happened. I just kind of randomly got a lot of stuff day by day, and I might catch it at one part of the newscast. I might catch it at another part, or catch part from one side, part from the other side. So, I mean, all I can do is form what I think may have happened, but that's just a thought. It's not even like fact.
Okay. So if you were to be picked as a juror, could you set aside that, what you just said in terms of your thoughts of what may have happened, can you set that aside and only make your decision on what actually the evidence that is presented to you in the courtroom?
Yeah, you would have to.
Okay. You're sitting as a juror, you listen to the evidence,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to make up a fact, so it's not related to this case.
Right.
One of the witnesses that, and one of the crucial parts of the case is what car was it? And it's not this case, so you understand.
Right.
And the witness says the car was red.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there listening, you go, oh, okay, he seems pretty credible.
Mm-hmm.
But, I seem to recall that there was some article in the newspaper that said the car was blue.
Right.
Which would you rely on in making your decision in the case? What you read in the newspaper about the car, or what the witness said about the car?
You would have to go with the evidence that's in the court.
And why is that?
Because you can't rely on the news.
Okay.
I mean,
Would you agree that when you're sitting as a juror, part of being a juror is they just don't put a vacuum and take everything, all you've read or seen about the case out of, in other words, that may pop into your mind as you're sitting there. And the question is...
Yeah, of course, of course it would pop into your mind, and then unless somebody else said, no, another witness said, I saw a blue car, then...
You would have to disregard what, in other words, you cannot factor in what the media, what you remember about the media. If it contradicts, or even if it supports it, you have to rely only on what the witness says.
Right.
Can you agree to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. And I gather in terms of the questions you were asked about whether, the trial in terms of how long it could take, we're estimating now, but potentially also the judge hasn't made the final decision about whether it was sequestered. I'm assuming you stated you had no conflict regarding that. Is that correct? Everybody has a conflict potentially. Nobody wants to be involved in such a process, but the question is, would it be an insurmountable hardship?
It would be extremely difficult. I have, 2 kids, and, I share responsibility and, taking care of those 2 kids and getting them from place to place and all that. And I work a full-time job, so, I would be a little bit nervous on the outcome,
Okay.
of all that. Yeah.
Right, sir. Your 2 kids, how old are they?
6 and 10.
Okay. And when you say nervous about the outcome, meaning?
Like where,
Are you talking about?
I have a full-time job.
Right.
And I hold a position at that job.
Yes, sir. And I'm aware of what that is, but
sequestered for 6 weeks, I would be nervous about where my position would be,
And are you concerned that maybe your job won't be there anymore when you get back?
Not there, but I would assume that they would have to figure something out in a 6-week period.
You're conscious. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
That would just, put me on edge a little bit, absolutely, especially in these times.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I think the court at some point may address that, but under the law, you cannot be, that is not appointed.
I know that I would not lose my job, but I don't know. I just, between that and having to figure out stuff with the kids, it would be definitely difficult.
And the court, all of us, both sides realize that that's a hardship for everybody. But, anyway, I'll leave it at that for right now. We may address it at a later time. But because I think you stated that it would not be an insurmountable, but that's why I was asking you that to make sure. Court may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Did I ask you in terms of Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff? You're not involved in that in terms of?
I'm not really big into. I've never Twittered ever.
Okay.
And Facebook, I do a little bit with family, and that's about it. But
No.
and that's something that really my wife set up. So I'm very low, I guess, on the Facebook end of it as far as I guess the norm for.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm not big into the social media, I guess.
Apparently in Facebook, when you pull up, sometimes there's news aspects to it. Did you read or see anything regarding the case on that?
I don't even get any news because I don't think I've ever got on Facebook on my laptop. I've only done it on my phone, and I don't think they have. I've never seen news clips on my phone.
Sure. Okay.
I usually just see what the people that I talk to, my family, and that's it.
I'm at a loss. My wife and kids do. I don't.
But I think on the full site on Facebook, if you go on a laptop, they do have news clips on the right. But
you haven't done any of that stuff.
I honestly, I don't even use my laptop. I use my phone for everything.
Okay. Do you have you by chance visited any websites in support of either side?
No.
Remember coming across any of that? Okay. And regarding, we talked about in terms of the media exposure or media broadcast related to the shooting itself and what happened. Anything else you can recall regarding the media commenting or stuff about the case or anything related to the case that comes to mind right now, other than the shooting itself? And
no.
Okay. Let me have a moment again, Your Honor. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Mr. West?
Good afternoon. My name is Don West, and this is Mark O'Meara on behalf of Judge Zimmerman here today. A couple long days already, I guess.
Yeah.
I know you said very candidly that it would be, with all the media attention this case has gotten, probably impossible not to have any opinion at all. Is that basically what you think?
Yeah, it's been definitely oversaturated, I think. It's similar to other past.
Like somewhat sensational as well?
I would say it's, honestly, I think that they take some of these, the news takes some of these big cases and turns them into entertainment, and it shouldn't be.
As a result of that sort of perception of what the media does, what do you do then when you hear something or read something in the news?
You can't take it for face value because you don't know what, I don't know that person or the news people that are, I can't trust what they say, word for word, because things can be changed to sensationalize stuff, I think.
So when you say that you have a view of the case or an opinion on some things, can we be a little more specific? Are you convinced, for example, that there was a struggle of some sort?
Yeah, I believe there was a struggle. It seems like there was.
Do you believe that the struggle went both ways?
Sure, it did go both ways. Yeah. I'm sure. One person was struggling with the other person.
What I mean both ways in the sense that based upon the information that you have and the opinions that you've been struggling with, do you believe that both of the individuals were aggressive toward each other?
Possibly. Like I said, I wasn't there, so it'd be hard for me to without hearing the whole story and everything, and if there was, it's hard to make a decision on that unless you had hard evidence on which way, one way or the other.
Oh, sure. And the focus of the questions is only based upon what you know as of right this minute, and trying to get a handle on your view of things because of all of the publicity this case has gotten, and how that might have affected you, and whether you hold some views strongly or not.
I don't think I have any strong views one way or the other. I mean, I don't really think about it beyond, I've never thought about it till, on a daily basis till now.
Sure. Okay. Back to the struggle idea. Are you convinced there was a struggle between Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman?
Yeah, I think there was some kind of struggle. It's that from what I've heard, it sounds like there was some kind of struggle. Whether there was or not, I guess you really have to see the evidence. It looks like there was, according to what information that was given to us as a general public. I mean, you would say that you would think that there was a struggle.
Have you any view or opinion as to who started it?
I had no idea. I wasn't there. I don't know who walked up to who.
Yes.
What point did they get face to face? I had no idea. I couldn't say.
Based upon what you've heard in the media and such, do you believe that George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin after being told not to?
That's what the phone, I guess, what I've heard, but what I've heard and what is factual, I guess, is at one point in time they got face to face. So I don't know who tracked down who, but at one point in time they must have gotten face to face for the tragedy that happened. So it wasn't something that happened like miles away from each other. So they had to have gotten face to face at one point in time, for the tragedy to happen. So how it happened and what led up to it, I couldn't say.
Sure. On the idea of George Zimmerman following Trayvon Martin, do you believe at some point in time that happened?
Objection asked and answered.
I believe it's been asked and answered, but if you want to answer it one more time, you may.
He may have followed him. I have no, I would, according to what I've heard, I guess he may have followed him. At what distance? I have no idea.
Do you feel that as a result of that, because you think that may have happened or probably did happen, do you think that means George Zimmerman did something wrong?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say that. It's hard to say. It depends on. I really couldn't say. It's just the.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. It's unfair to you. But what I'd like to focus on is what you think. When you heard all this stuff, how did it process through your brain, and what do you think now?
I don't know. At one point in time, they got close. So I don't know as far as the following went. How close it got, or if the other person turned around. I have no idea. From that point on, I know that. I don't know.
Okay.
If I was, a security guard, I don't know. It's hard for me to put myself in those shoes.
Based upon what you heard in the media, do you believe that George Zimmerman was a security guard?
I believe so. I thought he was. Like I said, I didn't watch it on an everyday basis, so I'm sure that some of the stuff I heard and some of it, maybe some of the stuff that I know is not factual. I'd have to sit down and really absorb all the information to really make any real, decisions on what I would think was the right thing or the wrong thing. Because I hadn't sat down and really watched it. Like I said, it's like you watch it, you see what happened. It was a tragedy. And then you see little bits of information going on,
Well, based upon what you heard in the media, do you think now, maybe subject to change, but do you think now that he was a security guard for the community?
I thought he was some kind of security. I didn't research any further on it as I shouldn't have. So I didn't really go into any depth on, in research of the case. I guess the less I know, the better till it's time to sit in the jury, right?
Okay. The evidence connected with the case that you may have heard in the news includes the 911 call, and that includes the voice of someone screaming. Did you hear that one?
I don't recall, no.
Do you have any information about that at all? That there's a recording connected with the case?
I knew there was a recording. I just don't know, the details on it.
Have you been involved in the news in the last couple of weeks where the case was mentioned?
No, not till I got summoned. And then from there on in, I wasn't able to watch the news from there on in.
Do you ever read the Orlando Sentinel newspaper?
No, I don't, honestly.
Do you subscribe to any newspapers?
No.
Is your news on this case limited to the sort of mainstream television stations you talked about?
Yeah, just the channels that I had mentioned. 2, 6, 9, 18, 35, 65. Those are the only channels I get.
Ah, okay. Is that from a basic cable?
I don't have cable.
Is it an antenna?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay, so you get whatever you can pull in from the rooftop.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not satellite, it's just the...
No, it's just a digital antenna.
I think what probably threw us off was on the questionnaire when you were asked about whether or not you hold an opinion about Mr. Zimmerman's guilt or innocence.
Right.
And you indicated that you did.
I don't hold an opinion on the guilt or innocence. Obviously, I have an opinion on what may have led up to the tragedy, but I don't know what the circumstances were that brought the tragedy, on.
Okay, so what you do know about the case from the media is some of the things that may have led up to the point of whatever struggle you believe occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And based upon that information, do you think that Mr. Zimmerman is more or less likely to be guilty?
I would have to get more information, because I don't really think that I have enough information to make an assumption either way.
Okay. You really don't have an opinion on that?
Not on who's more at fault. No, I don't.
I know you mentioned that you have a lot of responsibilities at work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you have a lot of water cooler time, I suppose. But have you not talked with anybody in the office?
No.
About this case, or mentioned even that you have a summons for jury duty?
I had to let my employer know I had a summons.
Did you and he have any conversation at all about the case?
No.
No friends, social contacts that you've talked about the case in any way?
No.
And I know you have young children. I'm assuming you probably wouldn't talk with them about the case.
No.
But how about other family?
No.
Not even out-of-state relatives that say, "Hey, what's going on with that?"
No, I don't even think my mother even knows I'm here. You know, and that's I talk to her like every day on the way home from work.
Does she live out of the area?
No, she lives in Palm Bay.
All right. There was another question asking about whether being on the jury would be a special challenge because of the length of time that it could last 4 to 6 weeks, that could be sequestered.
Right.
Do you know what sequestered means?
No contact with anybody.
There might be some visitation type contact, but you don't go home at night, and you stay together as a jury pretty much from that point until the matter is resolved. And knowing a little more about that, and considering the ages of your children and the extra responsibilities that your wife would have to take on, if you were asked that question now, whether or not the participation in this trial would cause an insurmountable hardship, would you still answer no, or would you check yes?
It would definitely cause some hardship, yeah. I mean, because of the different things as far as my wife would have to take on a lot of responsibilities, and she works a full-time job as well.
So you would no longer be available as a caretaker?
Yeah, it would be very, very difficult.
Would that concern you greatly?
Yeah.
Is it likely then your service here might actually be insurmountable in terms of the effect it would have on your family?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please remain seated. Counsel, when you're ready, approach. Thank you very much. If you'll follow Deputy Debs. Thank you, sir. And we're going to take a 10-minute recess. Did you find out what